So in recent news, it was just announced that Disney will be acquiring the rights to so that they can fold the franchise into its movie library. They're going to be starting off with a brand new movie, and we'll see how it goes. There, now you can take that and just plug in whatever they buy next, and then the whole internet can agree that I predicted it first. How's that sound? That's a good plan? I think that's a good plan. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Disney Q&A, the series where you guys send me all sorts of Disney questions, whether it's about the movies or the parks or the history or the books, and I try to give you answers to the best of my ability. This week's first question is about Disney acquiring stuff, and it comes from Wallace McCarthy, and Wallace asks, "It seems whatever franchise Disney buys the rights for, they put to good use, and even improve on it sometimes. What franchise do you think Disney should acquire and improve upon, or put to good use?" It's a question I think gets thrown around a lot, right? They've purchased Pixar, they've purchased Marvel, they've purchased Star Wars. What are they going to buy next? They've got the Muppets. I thought about this for a while. I think this is a really interesting question to ask because I think if you really break down what they bought and why, it starts to show the thinking that Bob Iger and the Disney company has had with these acquisitions. And I think the important thing to consider is that they buy properties that make their portfolio more well-rounded, right? Before they bought Marvel, they didn't have anything superhero related. They tried in the 90s with The Rocketeer, but it didn't really work out. When they bought Star Wars, did they really have any serious, sci-fi franchises going on? Like not that I could think of. Maybe a few movies here or there that were sci-fi related, but they didn't own anything like that. And so they always buy something that adds to it, which is why I always find it funny when people, talk about what should they buy next. People throw out things like DC Comics or, Star Trek or all of these things that would essentially just be more of what they already have. When really what they should be doing is stepping out of their comfort zone and buying something that they don't have anything like. My first thought went straight to the movies. Like, what movie franchise is there that they could pick up that would make them more well-rounded? And honestly, I think the answer there would be it would have to be something non-family friendly. They've got, I think, everything family friendly sort of cornered down. They've got the action stuff, they've got, the animated films, and they've got humor with things like the Muppets, and, they're just all over the place there. What else do they really need? But now I'm thinking about it, what about television? Now, cord cutting's a big problem for them. I think that's sort of why they're investing into Netflix a little bit more. I think we're going to see more stuff like the Marvel Netflix series, like Daredevil and things like that. Hopefully we see something similar with Star Wars. But here's my thought. Why not buy the rights to the Twilight Zone? Now, first off, for Disney park fans out there, this will have the immediate positive effect of it. They'll have a reason to keep around the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, one of the big rumored reasons for replacing it in California. And, one of the rumors behind them eventually doing it in Florida, although they're not going to, so relax, is that they have to pay for the rights to the Twilight Zone, which they don't own. So first off, they'd be able to continue using it. But secondly, when I think of what Disney does well with all of these acquisitions, it's the ability to find the right talented people to lead it and have this sort of long-term thought on how they can drive that property, not just over the next year or two, but over the next decade. And so think about rebooting the Twilight Zone on something like Netflix. How awesome would that be? To get someone like the best, younger directors who could do that sort of genre and get them to bring back the Twilight Zone. They've tried it in the past to bring back the Twilight Zone. It didn't really work very well. Not Disney, just, people in general. But I think that'd be really cool. And I think there is a market for it. Just look at stuff like Black Mirror, right? This isn't something that there's a vacuum. So why not have Disney, perfect it and throw it out there? I would just love to see a modernized Twilight Zone series under Disney's, leadership. And, that's a series, when you think about it, that tackles a lot of great issues, but at the same time isn't necessarily an adult series. So it's Disney being a more family-friendly company, I don't think would harm it. So, that's my answer, the Twilight Zone. I think they should buy the Twilight Zone, reboot it for Netflix, and then keep the Tower of Terror as it is. Our next question comes from Nolo the Rolo, and Nolo asks, if you were to ever build a fifth park, hypothetically, what do you think the theme would be and why? What would you want the theme to be? I think out of all of the questions I've gotten in the like almost 5 years I've been running this channel, this one is the one I get the most. And I usually ignore it because I've answered it before. And my answer in the past has always been, I don't want there to be a fifth park. I feel like there's no need to. There's so much work that needs to be done to Epcot, to Hollywood Studios, to the Animal Kingdom, that by the time you get through all of those, Magic Kingdom will be due for an update. Like 4 is enough for me that I don't really think we ever need to see a fifth park. But every time I get asked the question, I think about it again, make sure the answer is the same. And this time it was a little different. And you're going to have to go with me here, because if you watch the show that I'm about to reference, you might be thinking, what is wrong with you, Rob? But if you're an adult, old enough to watch it, I highly recommend the show Westworld. It's an unbelievable sci-fi film. It tackles a lot of topics that I think seem like sci-fi to us today, but are going to be actual real topics we're going to have to talk about in like 20, 30, 40 years when it comes to how we treat artificial intelligence and robotics and stuff like that. Point being, if you've never seen it before, Westworld is like a sci-fi futuristic theme park in which everything is the Wild West, and everybody who works there are robots. And so you can shoot them and do all the sort of things you do in the Wild West, but not have to fear repercussions because they're not actual people you're shooting. And obviously in the show, things go terribly wrong. I won't go into details or spoilers, just watch it if you can. But what it made me realize, and what I think has been discussed more and more recently, because you have things like Harry Potter, Hogwarts, or whatever, the Harry Potter area in Universal, you've got Star Wars Land coming, is this idea of a themed area specific to one genre or film franchise. And so I kind of want to see something like that. And the reason for that is I think Disney was built as a place to immerse you into another world. I think it still does that very well. But I think there is a disconnect when you're walking around a place like Tomorrowland and you see a Monsters, Inc. ride and then a Buzz Lightyear and then a Space Mountain, and you get these, they're all broken up. And yeah, within their own experiences, they can be highly immersive, but when you're walking around and you have this mishmash of all these properties, it reminds you you're in a theme park. So why not a fifth park that is themed to one franchise, one property, just one thing, and make it as immersive as possible? Obviously, it's not going to be a Westworld where you're running around shooting bad guys and stuff like that. It could still be rides and shows, but keep it themed to one thing. And while it has representation in the park already, rather than going with the Wild West, which I think is just a knockoff of Westworld, and Star Wars Land, which is going to happen, Pirates of the Caribbean. It's a big movie franchise. I think Pirates, that sort of Disney romanticized version of Pirates is really cool. I think you could have a whole bunch of different types of rides that are involved in the universe, but just make, rather than a Pirates of the Caribbean land, make a Pirates of the Caribbean park and make it as super immersive as possible. Maybe that's like a good topic for its own video in the future, because I'm really starting to think about like, okay, the little things like, how does food work over there? Because part of being immersed isn't, you don't want to get pulled out of it. You're like, all right, let me tap my magic band and buy a hot dog in this pirate land. Like, no, I want an immersive park where, you're going to a tavern and the only food there is the kind of stuff you get at a tavern. Like something like that, really extreme, like high intensity immersion. That's something I totally want to make a video on. So keep an eye out in the future. Our next question comes from NS Gaming, and NS Gaming asks, what is the Society of Explorers and Adventurers? Now this is another topic that I'm actually going to cover in a future video, because this has kind of spurred other Disney ideas that I want to like pitch to people out there. But if you've never heard of it before, this is a fictional society with fictional characters who are within that society that spans across multiple attractions across the world. Now, it's really, I think, not at the forefront of a lot of Disney fans' mind, but I think it's really cool, and I think we should see more of this stuff. So essentially, it is this explorer society, and it's made up of different members. I wrote their names down because I'm just not good with names. But you have Harrison Hightower III, Lord Henry Mystic, Barnabas T. Bouillon, Mary Oceaneer, and Jason Chandler. And what's interesting is all of these characters have some involvement in some Disney attraction around the world. So for instance, Harrison Hightower III is the owner of the Hightower Hotel, which is the Tokyo version of the Tower of Terror. Lord Henry Mystic, Mystic Manor over in Hong Kong Disney. Barnabas T. Bouillon and Jason Chandler are both characters involved with Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. And then you have Mary Oceaneer, who is seen both on one of the Disney cruise ships, but also is going to be getting her own attraction over at Typhoon Lagoon. And so the idea is all these characters sort of have a connection to all of those attractions, but they're also part of the same like Society of Explorers. And I think there are references in like Jock Lindsay's in Disney Springs and the Skipper Canteen. And I love this idea of this like very subtle, you know, if you're not looking for it, you're probably never going to notice it, backstory to all of these attractions, tying them together. And I believe the original, inspiration for this was the Adventurers Club, which was a themed nightclub over at Pleasure Island. And there's some tie-in where I believe Mary Oceaneer was stranded by the same storm that caused Pleasure Island. Like there's this whole elaborate backstory. It's interesting. You have to go like look it up on a wiki to read it all, because finding all the bits in the parks is obviously going to be a little challenging considering it's spread across, the entire world. But it's a cool idea. And I highly encourage doing a little bit more reading into it. I hope they do more stuff like this, and I hope they do other things that I'm going to talk about in a future video, so keep an eye out for that as well. Our next question comes from Ryan Sav, and Ryan asks, what would you say is your favorite book on the Disney World history? Interesting question, and an interesting opportunity for me to plug another video series. I actually do Disney book reviews. I try to do one a month. They mainly focus on history. I talk about which ones I like, which ones I don't like. So I highly suggest checking that out if you want to know a little bit more in depth about books. But I have two books that I'll recommend here in this video. So first off, you're asking for Disney World history. So for that one, I recommend a book called Reality Land. This goes into the construction of Walt Disney World. It goes into Epcot, Hollywood Studios, all the way up to the Animal Kingdom. I've got some gripes with that last half of the book, but the first half of the book I think is a fantastic telling of the story of how Disney World was created, and I actually have a video reviewing this book a little bit more in depth, so I highly suggest that one. Now, in general, my favorite Disney book is actually a book called Disney War. I've read this thing 2 times front to back, and I must have read it at least another, 1 or 2 times, just skipping through and reading chapters. It's by James Stewart. This covers Michael Eisner's tenure, from when he's brought into the company in the mid-'80s to when he's sort of forced out of it. It is not the kind of book where you're going to learn about the magic of Disney. It's not going to be about creating magical experiences and, bringing people to another world. This is a business book. This is about Michael Eisner and how he turned a company that was very popular at the time, but very economically or financially in peril, to one of the biggest media companies in the entire world, and the ups and the downs that brought him there. And I think it's just really interesting to get that perspective of how this company works, because we might love The Beauty and the Beast as a movie, but I think it's also interesting to know how that gets made, because it wasn't as simple as them going, this is going to be a magical story, let's make it. No, I mean, there are great little bits in here where The Little Mermaid almost didn't exist because they had made a live-action mermaid movie called Splash with Daryl Hannah and Tom Hanks, and Eisner at one point thought, we don't need another mermaid movie, so let's scrap it. And, just think about that. We might have almost lost a Disney classic over that. And so I love hearing stories like that and how the company works. So I highly recommend Disney War or Reality Land if you want something a little bit more park-specific. And our final question today comes from Valentina. Valentina asks, how does Disney choose which movie, TV show, characters will get merchandise that is sold within the parks? I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't work at Disney, and that is definitely the sort of thing where Disney is going to keep that thing a secret. Merchandising, it's funny, I was just reading a book called Be Our Guest, and it's about sort of their way of doing things as a company. And there is a whole chapter about what they call guestology, which is the study of guests. What do they want? What do they need? What do they want? How do they change over time? How do they break down into demographics? And there's no doubt that that amount of guestology is what goes into merchandising as well. What are people gonna buy? What do we look at historically and see people do buy and don't buy? It might not be as simple as which movies and characters do we support, but what kind of products do we support? And I'm sure they'll use things like focus groups and surveys and stuff like that to get a feel for what people are looking for and use that to sort of drive their decisions. And then lastly, I think any company, at least any good company out there, and I certainly would think Disney's one of them, takes feedback into account. If you want to see a product from a certain movie or property, think Christine and her love for Hunchback. Tell them, send them an email, write them a letter, call them. That's the sort of stuff that, you alone might not drive that decision to happen, but they take that feedback into account and go, hey, a lot of people are asking for this stuff and, we don't have any of it. Maybe we should test it. And it might fall into creating a tiny little product that they put out there and see how it sells and then judge from there about whether expanding or not. But I think it's a mix of all of that stuff. There's just so many moving parts when it comes to how that decision's made, and being outside of the machine, it's hard to tell which ones are the biggest parts. So all I could do is guess. Anyway, great questions this week. I want to thank you all for sending them in. If you have a question that you would like answered in a future Q&A, you could leave it in the comments below. You could also send it to me on Twitter. I'm @RobPlays. If you want to see more videos like this, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button. I do 3 videos a week all about Disney. Thank you all for watching. Have a great week. Whatever you're doing, make the most of it because it makes it that much better. And I'll see you next time for the next Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody.